Nothing in this podcast is intended to render legal, financial, medical, or other professional information. Because the details of your situation are fact-dependent, we highly encourage you to find a recommended individual that you can trust to give you the expertise that you need related to your situation.
The transition to medical matchmaking, which, for those of you listening, is where I help doctors find practices where we can actually enjoy practicing medicine, and I'll help the practices to find those physicians as well. I'll only work with physician-owned private practices. I did that in large part because I was seeing that other physicians did not feel that they had those choices and were not looking at their options in totality. Not knowing what to ask for in interviews, not having that empowerment to be able to walk away or say no or any of those things. I was presented a contract by a large hospital system, which to me had multiple deal breakers in it. There were things that I wouldn't sign, not a chance. I'd rather be unemployed than sign those. The hospital system had no hesitation in saying, take it or leave it. And if that's how they are with their contracts, that means that the thousands of physicians that are employed by them all signed this contract. Whereas if every single one of us had had the confidence to walk away, they have to change it. But the physicians that I spoke to that did sign it all said either we didn't know or I didn't have a choice. But of course we have choices, just enough of us need to execute those choices for change to happen.
Today, having a modern medical practice means utilizing the latest technology. MedCharts is a doctor-designed EMR toolkit that offers a streamlined solution to an often overwhelming process. Our software features include organized patient charts, appointment scheduling, generating e-reports and patient scripts using templates, graphing vitals and labs, importing lab reports, intra-office and patient communication, and billing software for invoicing and credit card transactions. Our user-friendly patient portal allows your patients to have access to their own charts. The best part? MedCharts is free. Let us take care of your practice so you could take care of your patients. Learn more and download our free demo today at medcharts.com.
Well, good morning, Docpreneur Nation. You're listening to Concierge Medicine Today's Docpreneur Leadership Podcast. And we have a true Docpreneur here in our midst today, one that really needs no introduction, Dr. Lara Hochman. She is a family medicine physician and the medical matchmaker. And I am going to let you tell your story because you tell it best and with such enthusiasm. So thanks for being our guest today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me today. Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
So we have so much to talk about because the next chapter of your life as a physician listening to this starts, I think, today with really one simple step. And it's because you've got to choose what you're going to do next. And so much of that is wrapped up in who you are, where you work, where you live, and you've got responsibilities. But Dr. Hochman is here to, I think, help alleviate the pressure that you may put on yourself to say, you know what, I've been thinking about a career transition, but there's a lot of things holding me back. I got 2 kids in college I'm currently paying for. I don't want to leave a stable paycheck. What is next? So we want to talk about navigating what is next in every physician's life that might be listening to this, or you're considering this, given we've just come out of this huge pandemic. And a lot of people have made career choices and shifts in their practice. So before we jump into that, let's talk about your background, your bio. Let's go all the way back to the beginning, maybe 2 years ago, right? And just look at how did you get into medicine? Like, was it a family business? Was it just something that was like, I kind of am pretty good at science and I just went my own direction away from what my family is?
Yeah, how I got into medicine. And I actually often ponder, what the heck was I thinking? It wasn't really so much a choice as a given. I kind of grew up saying, I'm going to be a doctor. It was just that's what I was going to be. It wasn't really any question. And then as I went through high school, I enjoyed biology. It was my favorite class. I found it immensely interesting. And, you know how we always find there's confirmation bias in everything we do. And so I had thought to myself, well, I like biology. I like people. I'll be a doctor. And where I went to high school, which is South Africa, you go to medical school straight from high school. So it wasn't that, I wasn't used to that mindset that we have in America. If you go to college, you figure things out. I went to college to be a doctor. That's what I went to college to be. And I kind of had that pigeonholed vision of being a doctor since I can remember.
So you grew up in a different country than the United States. What kind of brought you here? And were you practicing medicine overseas?
No, I came here after high school. Another one of those givens. I was like, when I finish high school, I will go to America. And I think when you think of things in a way of, just being a given, you just make it happen because you just follow the steps that automatically will do that. And I have no regrets. I love living in the United States. I'm so grateful to be here. And South Africa is a beautiful country, but goodness gracious, am I grateful to be living here. And I think it's a lot of kind of what goes on in medicine too, where we may be given too many choices, and maybe just changing that and changing our thought process and just making the decision and make it happen.
So it's interesting because, coming from South Africa, you had a lot of choices. Like the world is at our feet nowadays, and you chose America's medical education system. And for better or worse, I remember we were talking with Dr. McCarthy years ago, and she said, not only is it going to take an act of Congress to change how we educate medical physicians, it's going to take an act of Congress, an act of God to do that. And in a lot of ways, some of that was, maybe the pandemic coming into our lives. But you could have gone anywhere in the world to study medicine. What drew you to America's system? Because a lot of times people say, well, it's the best system in the world. But then at the same time, there's a lot of things happening in precision medicine and genomics and other things in other parts of the country too, or other parts of the world as well. So what drew you to the American medical education?
Those were two completely separate things. I wanted to be a doctor and I wanted to live in America. It wasn't necessarily the American medical system. As a child, I had no idea what the difference was. I just knew I wanted to be a physician. I wanted to help people. I enjoy that. And so that's what I'm going to do. And then as a separate thought process, I'm going to come to the US. I had visited America as a kid and I always enjoyed it. And it's a great place. It's a safe place. I like
Well,
it.
now I want to ask an interesting question, because fast forward a few years, we're going to reverse in just a minute. But when it seems as though so many physicians we talk to have they have that, I love biology, I love medicine, I love what it just really intrigues folks, right? But then I also love people. So I want to fast forward to where you are now with perspective in the rearview mirror and say, do you still love people?
Yes, I still love people.
So despite the rigors of medicine, because it can be tough, you wear an impossible burden every day. Unpack how people are such a part of that and how you still maintain that caring and love for people to help them.
I think something I've always been naturally inclined to do is see things from other people's perspectives. So, I don't think everyone is all good or all bad. We all have good and bad in us. And I think that has carried me through a lot of it. I tend to always look for the best in people. And I like to focus on the people in my life that have had a positive impact. I still love my patients, even if they're calling me at 2 a.m. because they've been constipated for 5 days, which, probably not appropriate. They probably don't know better. And at 2 a.m. I'd be a little bit annoyed. but then, when I have a little perspective, I'm like, they just don't know better. But yeah, medicine absolutely hasn't changed how I feel about people. I still love it. It's people are the reason I still enjoy medicine. It's not, I mean, I can prescribe blood pressure medicine, in my sleep. It's not the medicine part that I enjoy as much. I enjoy medicine, but it's more the people. I love people.
Well, and it's great because we need that perspective, because oftentimes the grumpies out there, and we've all encountered them in the medical profession, where it's like, I remember teaching a seminar, and I was on a panel with a group of doctors, and I was moderating the panel. And the question from the audience was from an emergency room physician, a little older gentleman. And he said, "So you're telling me in order to make this work, what you're talking about today, I have to be nice to every patient?" And so it's like, I was like, well, I'm just the moderator. I'm going to allow the physician panel to answer that question, because oftentimes with the bureaucracy, which we'll talk more about, and with the, charting and the boundaries that continually get pushed and buttons that get pressed, you can lose that enthusiasm for helping people. So I'm grateful that you answered that, because it does show that there is hope out there. There are physicians out there who still do love people despite the circumstances that you're faced with each day. So before we jump into that, let's hit the reverse gear again and go back to, you have now left medical school. You've got some decisions to make about where you're going to go work, what you're going to do. What happened then for you?
I'll reverse even more, since, I think today we're probably going to be focusing a little bit on choices. I actually went to medical school to be a surgeon. I love surgery. I love working with my hands. And I had, done all the research and presented at international conferences and all of this. I was going to be an ear, nose, and throat surgeon. And knowing my priorities in life, it didn't quite align with those, and ended up changing my mind. I canceled all my ENT interviews and went into family medicine instead. And I think that's important to know too, since, I changed it. I changed what you can't get any more different surgery to family medicine. But it took taking a very close look at what was most important to me. And that's how I ended up in family medicine.
So then you experienced what that was like. How did that change your priorities for family, but also for professionally? It was like, this is not exactly what I had hoped for, but maybe I'm stuck here because of an educational decision. How did you navigate those choices?
I never felt stuck. They definitely, once I was in a job and kind of ready to leave, I was never really ready. I definitely had that stuck feeling that a lot of us feel. But other than that, I never felt limited by my choices. I decided what I wanted to do and I did it. My priorities are, like most of us, are family, my kids and my husband and my parents. And that's always guided everything that I do. So my first year out of residency, I had a little newborn at home, and I just did locums, and it was all locally. So I was living in Denver, Colorado, and I just worked when I felt like, I wanted to work, and I stayed home with my kid when I wanted to stay home, and I made my hours. I never worked 5 days a week. I got to really enjoy that time with my newborn baby, and it was wonderful. So that was my first year out, and I have no regrets. I mean, I certainly didn't earn as much, but you can't get that time back. And I'm so grateful for that.
So now we talk about, you made a transition into the medical matchmaker business, or maybe I've skipped ahead too much. Talk to us about that transition, why you moved into where we are today to help physicians make difficult choices and navigate those different stages that they do feel stuck.
Yeah. And I will add to that I am still practicing medicine. I enjoy it, and I'm not ready to give it up. The transition to medical matchmaking, which, for those of you listening, is where I help doctors find practices where we can actually enjoy practicing medicine. And I'll help the practices to find those physicians as well. I'll only work with physician-owned private practices. I did that in large part because I was seeing that other physicians did not feel that they had those choices, and were not looking at their options in totality. not knowing what to ask for in interviews, not having that empowerment to be able to walk away or say no or any of those things. I was presented a contract by a large hospital system, which to me had multiple deal breakers in it. There were things that I wouldn't sign, not a chance. I'd rather be unemployed than sign those. But the hospital system had no hesitation in saying, take it or leave it. And if that's how they are with their contracts, that means that the thousands of physicians that are employed by them all signed this contract. Whereas if every single one of us had the confidence to walk away, they have to change it. But the physicians that I spoke to that did sign it all said either we didn't know or I didn't have a choice. But of course we have choices. Just enough of us need to execute those choices for change to happen.
So I want to talk about, I want to read something to you and then let you expand on it. And then that will jump into our first of 3 categories to talk about, which today we're going to talk about physician employment priorities. Then we'll talk about enjoying the practice of medicine again. And then finally, evaluating the job opening that you've been looking at. You get offered all these different jobs. You've been looking at these jobs. A recruiter called, a peer said this to that. How do you evaluate that decision? So before I jump into this, I want to talk about what's often many physicians struggle with, which is workaholism. And it was from the book At Your Best, How to Get Your Time, Energy, and Priorities Working in Your Favor by Carey Nieuwhof. He said, workaholism is, after all, the most rewarded addiction in the nation. You can be fired for drinking too much, but working too much usually gets you promoted. It also gets you a raise. So you dump yourself into bed, exhausted most nights, only to do it all over again tomorrow. I'm going to let you take the floor for a minute.
Gosh, that's such a good, I don't even know. I have so many things running around my head here. I think we've all been there. And even in my medical matchmaking, I've done it. And then I had to reel myself back in here. And it's funny because my husband is an addiction psychiatrist. So that's definitely one of the things he deals with. But people don't tend to come get help for work addiction. It's a very interesting thing. I think there's a part of it that we are all workaholics. I mean, we're physicians. We all know what it took to get to this point. And I think it's so important to really know what our priorities are as a first step in that work addiction or workaholism, we can call it, to really reel it in. And we are, we go to work from 8 to 5 and we see patients from 8 to 5. There is no time in there for charting, for all the administrative burden that we have to do, for answering patient messages and reviewing lab results or reviewing consult messages and all these things that we have to do in our 8 to 5 day that are not patient care. And yet we have 100% of our time is taken up by patient care. And so that's where we then, we'll stay late, we'll work after our kids go to bed, we'll work on weekends, which we shouldn't be doing. I mean, not only is it not compensated, but it's not sustainable. It's a big part of why we're having this mass exodus from medicine. And it's not even just that we are trying to get promoted. It's also that we're just trying to keep our heads above water. I think a part of it too is that, we're told what to do and we do it. Our decision-making and empowerment capabilities are kind of bred out of us in medical training. And I think it's time to say, hey, I'm going to finish patients at 4. I'm going to take a 2-hour lunch break, whatever it is that works for us, or I'll take a 4-day week. And being okay with maybe that means you're taking a pay cut, but you know what? Like, your sanity is worth whatever that pay cut is. We make money by seeing patients. So if we're seeing less patients, maybe we'll make less money, and maybe that's okay. Maybe we can make that work for ourselves.
I have so many questions, but I want to make sure we stay on track. But I maybe we'll do a part 2 in the next few months when both of our schedules align again, right? It's like, I have so many good questions I want to ask you. But let's talk about, we today is we're talking a lot about, I think I was reading a story about patient or physician burnout. And it's like, now there's a study that came out that said physicians are burned out on hearing about physician burnout. So let's talk about, we talk a lot about patient burnout. We do a lot of work in physician burnout, but we talk a lot about patient burnout. So to what you just said, related to, taking a pay cut, not seeing as many patients are seeing it too from the other side of the exam room. And I'm not a physician, but I am a patient. So I do know what it's like to sit on the other side of that service window or the other side of the exam room. And we feel a little bit of what you're feeling, because you don't come into the exam room happy. You're not smiling. You're not nice. Your staff's not nice. The culture of the practice, we put on this invisible suit of armor as patients before we go to the doctor's office, expecting a battle, and we leave fatigued and stressed, and usually in a wake of acronyms and abbreviations that we don't understand. Even my wife last week was saying, I wish the pediatrician, she just dropped a bomb on us at the end. And was like, okay, see you later. It's like there was no coaching, there was no continued education. It was just, we'll see you next time, maybe. So in moving forward with that, there are a lot of priorities to juggle as a physician related to physician employment priorities. When a physician comes to you, where you have dinner with them, you take them on a consult call over Zoom, they say, I got to talk to you. What's the first couple of things you talk to them about related to physician employment priorities? But you're also welcome to talk a little bit about patient burnout too. So.
Yeah, the calls normally just start by me listening to where they are and what they are, usually what they're hating about their job at the moment. And, a lot of times I'll have physicians that I speak to that are thinking about leaving medicine. And the reason is because I don't like being a doctor anymore. And when we dig into it, it's almost always because of the administrative burden, because of how long they're spending after hours charting or doing all the things, because of having no autonomy in how to take care of the patients, not having enough time with patients. It's got nothing to do with taking care of patients, and it's got nothing to do with the actual medicine itself. It's all the things surrounding it, which have been added onto our plates. And kind of when we strip that all out, it's very obvious that they normally still love practicing medicine and they still love taking care of patients, just not in the system that we are currently in anymore. So, and the patients are definitely feeling that. Of course, the patients want to sit down and have their doctor explain to them whatever. Like if you come in with an earache and it's not an ear infection, and you come in wanting antibiotics, and maybe it's some like totally weird thing, like a tight medial pterygoid muscle, and your doctor's like, okay, well, it's not an ear infection, goodbye. Well, not only are you like unsure what to do, but if your doctor sits down, they're like, okay, there's this muscle called the medial pterygoid. It's attached to a nerve that's also attached to your little ear muscles, and like draw it out. I mean, that's what makes medicine fun. That's what makes, the relationship part of medicine fun, is when you get to sit down and really, tease out these little things and explain it to people and answer questions, and have those times to really not just answer questions and do the medical side, but get to know them. Like, I had a patient about a month or two ago, and I was telling her about my sister-in-law, and I was like, I can't remember what city she lives in, or what city she grew up in Mexico. And then the patient came back 2 months later, and I was like, Monterrey. She grew up in Monterrey. And to be able to have that relationship, because, the patient grew up in Mexico too, but to know that about her and know about what she likes about Mexico, and all the things, like all the social parts of a person's life that makes them who they are. I mean, probably that's why I still love people, because it's my focus. I mean, I just like getting to know people, and most doctors do. And there are certainly physicians who want to get in, take care of the medical condition, and get out. But I think once we, as physicians, and which patients will feel, but I think once a physician gets to the point of going to work to get the job done, I think that's kind of when you need to start noticing, like, maybe I'm not in the right place, because I've lost that love of medicine that I used to have.
And it seems like in those conversations, you have to kind of put a pause button on them and say, it's not just about applying and finding a new job. Like you're going to carry and you probably hear your husband say this all the time, and because he's a counselor, and he's like, well, you still carry all your baggage with you wherever you go. Like, that kid who hurt you in high school, you're still carrying him around, like you're going to carry all that stuff into your new job. It's not just about finding a job. So let's take a step back and evaluate. We got to put you in the right environment too, that you can function well in. So how does that conversation go? And then what options do you provide or advice do you coach them on?
Yes, that's a very big thing. I'm going to try to remember all the questions in there. One of the things that I see a lot is when people jumping out of one abusive system and then into another abusive system. So, I see job changes as an opportunity to really take a look at your priorities and approach the job search from that perspective. So that's the one thing. The other, we take our baggage with us, but we also take our habits with us. So, I've been actively fighting my workaholism since I graduated residency. And, I had work-life balance down. I had it perfect as a physician. And then here I am starting a new business. And then my workaholic tendencies came right back up. I mean, that's just who I am. Especially when I feel passionate about something, I'm going to do it until I feel like whatever, comfortable, or I guess until I realize what I'm doing to myself. And so, I brought those habits along with me in my medical matchmaking and had to remind myself and really work hard to dial myself back. I mean, I'm a true workaholic. I had work-life balance as a physician. I figured it out. And then here I am starting a new business. And I had to figure it out all over again. So not just that we bring our baggage with us, but we bring our tendencies with us. So I think that self-awareness is so important in that. The third question, I think, was, how do you approach a job search, or how can I help you?
Yes.
Okay. So approaching a job search should start with listing out your priorities and being completely honest with yourself. You don't have to show it to anyone, but, all the things. Like, I would just word vomit on a piece of paper all of your priorities, and just list them out as you think of them. So salary, location, family, hours, work-life balance, administrative support, how big or small of a practice, autonomy, room for growth. There's such a long list. So really kind of knowing what your priorities are. First, just write them down, then step away, come back and put those in order. And you may surprise yourself. And I would be completely honest with yourself there too. I think the big thing is we all tell ourselves that money isn't important, but realistically speaking, we have, often $500,000 of student loan debt we need to pay off, or, we have a mortgage, we have car payments, we have kids in college, all those things that we need to be planning for. So being completely honest with yourself, how much is salary important to you? And how much are you willing to sacrifice for that work-life balance and for time with your kids? Because that will play a very, very big part in your decision-making, probably the biggest. But knowing that before you start looking for jobs is really important. And then also knowing if growth opportunities are important to you, what type of growth opportunities. So not just knowing what the priorities are, but really looking into each one. So, growth opportunities in a private practice are going to look very different to growth opportunities in a very large system. So, do you want to be a part of the change? Do you want to help us be a part of, please help us push the boulder up the hill, as you said before we started recording. I love that analogy. All those things. So that's kind of where I would start with approaching a job search. Before you even start is knowing your priorities. And then that should be able to guide not just which jobs you apply for, but how you approach the interviews and how you approach your decision-making and how you approach the discussions you have with your family about, what job you're thinking about and why.
So on that note of, I want to take us to the metaphor of the mountain for a second, because I find that I was talking with a mentor of mine the other day, and I said, sometimes I feel like I'm I'm pushing this boulder up a mountain more often than not by myself, because it gets lonely and, you're like, who else out there is talking about this stuff and nobody's listening. And then you get somebody comes along and helps you for a few days or weeks or a couple of years. How often do you find that physicians feel kind of isolated, even though they've got a lot of patients, a lot of peers, a lot of colleagues around, maybe even a few family members, but they feel like maybe they're making a decision in a box? They don't want to look at Monday morning as a penalty box anymore. What do you tell that physician that is maybe feeling isolated, even though they've got all these people around them? What do they do?
Oh, that's a big question. It all depends on the person. I think physician or patient, I think one of the things that I'm seeing a lot of is that we're not, as human beings, reaching out to other human beings. There's probably nothing more important to our survival than our communities. Even when you look at the longevity studies, the people with the most longevity are people who've maintained friendships for long periods of time. So at first, just knowing that I'm in that corner and I'm here to help them and root for them is, I think, just huge in and of itself. But also just kind of talking to them about their community and their support system and what to do. I don't think that adding anything to their lives is probably the best thing, but being able to figure out what to take away so that they have more time to just take a deep breath and not think of Monday mornings as that dreaded day, or every morning, really.
Well, I'm saving some of my lightning round questions for you so I can still get my questions answered. But as we come in for a landing on the third item, because I was like, man, I just got so many good questions for you. And you're the perfect personality to answer those questions, because I want to we have two physician audiences that listen to this podcast, one that have already found joy in the practice of medicine again for a second time. And then the others are curious about this and like, what am I going to do next? Because I don't know how to make the right decisions when life is uncertain and I'm feeling depressed and I don't want to wake up and strap on the overalls and do this all over again. And you said something in one of your interviews or one of your podcasts that I thought, finally, like, you're one of the only ones I've ever heard talk about this. And that is the medical associations, the medical journals, the medical community stepping up to the plate. I plan an industry conference for doctors. And we talk a lot about leadership. We talk a lot about character quality. We talk a lot about burnout, all types of different things that I find: customer service, hospitality in healthcare, patient burnout, physician. We talk a lot about a whole bunch of different things. And I wish I could keep that audience for a month, but that's impossible. However, you brought up a really great point in some of yours, and I want you to expand on that, because I've been trying to call out medical conferences, medical associations, the journals out there to say, we got to help these doctors out there. We got to do a better job versus just offer them a CME in Jamaica.
Yeah. Oh, that's a big one. First of all, I would say that we can't count on them. I think they've, depending on the association, some of them have done a good job. Others have been abysmal failures. And I think there's a lot behind that. I think there's probably a lot of politics, some we do know about and some we don't know about, that's leading that charge. I think that it's up to us. I think it's up to every single one of us as physicians to do our own part. So, there are some of those associations that are helping, and we should join them. There's now, starting physician grassroots organizations to try to work towards that. But even each one of us, like every single person listening to this, should do something. It's going to take us as physicians in leadership positions. It's going to take us as physicians doing some crazy things and going out of our comfort zone to make those changes. So they can be as big as, I would have never guessed that I would start a company, but that's how I felt that I would have the biggest impact. It doesn't have to be that gigantic. It can be pushing back on a contract. It can be pushing back on a non-compete. It could be making your voice heard. Obviously there are certain circumstances where you can't make things happen. There are certain, visas, if you're on a visa waiver, you want to just kind of fly under the radar until you can be here. But every single one of us can make a change, even if it's just speaking with our physicians and spreading the word, or even, I know a lot of your audience is in the concierge space. So a lot of physicians I speak about say, well, I don't want to go concierge, or I don't want to do direct primary care because there isn't, I would only be able to see 600 patients. And then the other 3,000 patients that I typically see would lose access to me. So instead, I think I'm just going to leave medicine. That's not helping. That's not helping you or anyone. And so I think if each one of us really makes that change without doing what we think we're told to do, or being able to step up and say something, I think that would make a huge difference.
Oh, I finally found somebody who's like-minded, right? Like, I just want to give a big bear hug and be like, finally, there's somebody out there who's actually pushing this gigantic boulder out there as well with us. And I think it was John Acuff said, be weird until the rest of the world catches up. And for the physicians listening, you're like, I'm tired of doing hard stuff. Like, well, you're going to have to do hard stuff again, even if you do leave medicine. And it breaks my heart as a patient, as a father, as, and I always say then when I talk to doctors, I get a little teary because I recognize I've been in the ambulances with my kids. I've seen I've had to do kind of an intervention with mom, to make sure her doctor is like clued in to what's really going on versus just the 5-minute visit and tick that, that box off the box for that schedule. And so we can't afford to lose more doctors, because you're too important. I always say 5 words from you, from my doctor, like probably one of the 5 most influential voices in our lives. 5 words from you can change my world. This probably isn't 5 words, but like, Mike, you're going to be pre-diabetic if you keep eating all this bread. Mike, Kelly, you're going to be this or that. Your kids are going to do this. 5 words from my doctor carry more weight than 50 words about my doctor. So be weird until the rest of the world catches up. Finally, in our third, evaluating practices, doctor's got 5 options that he comes to you with, and maybe this isn't how it works. So you explain to me how your process works and how you help decisions navigate those practices. And now I want you to also tell us a little bit about Happy Day Health.
Oh, okay. Well, those would be a combined answer, I guess. What Happy Day Health does is a few different things. So one is we'll work directly with physician-owned practices that we've vetted and we have really gotten to know pretty well how they work. And to get to know who they are and who the right fit for them would be. And then I go out and I try to help them find that physician. On the other, any physician that I work with that's interviewing for a practice, number one, I wouldn't set them up with that practice if I don't think they'd be a good fit. But number two, I'll speak to them about all the places that they're interviewing and really get to evaluate that. I do also work with physicians. If a physician says to me, hey, I am so burned out, I'm ready for a change. We'll go over what's their non-compete. Most important thing. And then we'll talk about where they want to be, what type of practice they want to be in. And then I go out and I try to find it for them. So it takes a lot of that burden off of them for trying to find their own job. And, I see so much in the physician job boards, people are like, I can't find a job. And, we're not allowed to, but I want to be like, I'll help you. Come on. But yeah, I spend a lot of time going out and finding those practices and talking to the physicians about their different options. So an example is right now I'm working with a physician who wants to move to be closer to her family. And, there's a lot of roadblocks here. And we're kind of in the discussion of, do we want to work for a system that maybe won't treat you as well, but planning your exit strategy before you even start interviewing for them, to at least get you closer, but make it so that you have that exit strategy to be able to leave when the right opportunity comes along. So It's not always about finding the right job, which, in an ideal world, it should be. And I think the more of us that work towards things, there will be more options. But for a lot of times, that's where the priorities come in, is let's get you closer to your family and then plan for your exit before you even start. And then we keep working to find you the right place, which may be a year or two, but you can be closer. So my preference is to be in places that will treat you well, but I kind of help through the whole process. So I'll help physicians with, finding the right jobs, preparing for interviews, debriefing after the interviews, evaluating different jobs, looking at contracts and negotiating those contracts with them. And I'm not a lawyer. I definitely have a couple of lawyers in my back pocket that I really enjoy working with that are completely on the physician side. But I will help to say, hey, if you want this, that may not be realistic, but this is another thing that you could probably negotiate for, that would maybe be more realistic for the practice, but also maybe be more better for you.
I'm glad you brought up the exit strategy part. We've talked a lot about leaving your current job well, like leaving, even though you're like, I hate the people there. I don't want to, I don't hate everybody, but okay, it's a strong word. But for the most part, I really don't enjoy my job. Like, I don't enjoy the people. I don't enjoy my supervisors. I love the patients for the most part, but I don't enjoy it there. But we've got to teach. Are you finding that you're needing to teach and train physicians how to leave the practice well, so that even despite the issues they've had with administration, peers, whoever it might be, colleagues and coworkers, that there's, you're like, you probably should send a thank you note thanking everybody that you worked with, because you just never know. What do you tell them when they want to leave well, but they're like, I just want to leave quickly and put that behind me?
Yeah, it's all perspective. So we'll talk a little bit about perspective in that instance, and kind of what to do and how to do it and all of those things. But yeah, I mean, when you're ready to leave this instant and you give a month notice, or in many cases, doctors, in their contracts are saying that they have to give, the contract say 6 months. I mean, that's torture to give your notice and have to still work there in a place you're miserable for 6 months. So we'll talk a little bit about that and how to do it. And yeah, a lot of what I do too is telling doctors how to decline a job offer. Because a lot of doctors are scared to tell someone, no, I don't want to work there.
Well, how do they find you? How do they connect with you? What's the first couple of steps you want them to take?
Best way of contacting me is through my website, which is www.happydayhealth.co. There's a contact form on there. Just put your name and email address and send me a little message. It goes directly to my email. And, or you can go on LinkedIn. Lara Hochman, MD is my LinkedIn name. I'm also on Instagram, Twitter, everything. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. My name's Happy Day Health MD, I think, or I don't even know. Happy Day MD. I don't even know what my handle is.
We'll put the links. We'll put all those links, and I'll find all those as well. And make sure, because you've got to go check it out if you haven't already. If you don't already know about Dr. Lara Hochman, you got to check it out, because the videos are very entertaining. You put out some really great content related to, is this the right one for me? How do I say no? All those types of things. So please, we'll go check out the show notes below, but make sure that you get connected with Dr. Lara Hochman, because you just never know. Everybody's going to be in a career transition at one point or another. You're going to have some hard decisions. You need somebody like Dr. Hochman who can be on your side, who is on your side, understands where you've been, where you can go, the potential that you still have. And so I really think that what you're doing is amazing. And so I want to thank you for what you're doing and having the courage to do what you're doing, because it's not easy to take, pay cuts here and there and do side hustles here and there and have difficult, long conversations over here. You're doing so much work. And I want to thank you for pushing that boulder up the mountain, so to speak. Now we enter the lightning round of our questions, and I won't ask you too many, but I'll start with the last book you read.
Oh, Eat that frog.
Pardon?
Eat that frog.
Eat that frog. Okay. What's that? Briefly, what's that one about? Is that pleasure reading?
No. It's a book about making sure you do the most unpleasant thing of the day first. So nobody wants to eat a frog, so you eat that frog.
You know, that goes in line with one of my favorite books I last read, which was At Your Best by Carey Nieuwhof. And it essentially breaks down your schedule of each day by red, yellow, and green, and identifies when in the day you have the most energy, which would be do the hardest things, which are your green zone. Then the yellow zone's like, I can phone this podcast, this interview, this patient in, like, I can do this all day. And then the red zone's like, don't talk to me. Like, I've had enough today. Like, we're good. And oftentimes our family, unfortunately, gets a lot of us when we're in that red zone. So At Your Best is another one, but Eat That Frog. All right. Last podcast you listened to, or podcast you're currently listening to.
I am currently in the middle of an episode of the Entree MD podcast.
Oh, she's great. Dr. Una.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, she came and spoke to us and did a couple of interviews, but also came to our conference and spoke. And she just blew everybody out of the water. She has amazing advice and insights. So, wow, yes, she's amazing. And we'll put the links to Dr. Una's show in the show notes as well, because I think that's a super helpful resource. Okay, so boundaries with family and friends. This is something we have tackled a lot. We get a lot of physician insights and their advice. Some of them are very comical. You're like, I got a C in medical school in that area. Probably shouldn't be asking me that, just to kind of like push the crazy uncle off, But how do you deal with boundaries with family and friends who ask you for free medical advice?
Well, my family knows I don't give free. I'll give advice, but I don't tend to do any prescriptions, so they know that, and are not happy about it. With friends, I think it comes from a place of not understanding what it means to ask a physician outside of the office for advice. So I just explain to them, hey, I'm sorry, I can't give you advice because it's not legal. I could lose my job, I could lose my license, but you should definitely ask your physician. Or, it's usually kid questions. I say, that is a great question for your pediatrician.
Let's talk a little bit about thank you notes real quick. How often do you do those, or do you talk to your clients about this, about the importance of thank you notes in healthcare? I'm a big, big fan. Like, if I'm known as the thank you note guy at the end of my career, I'm okay with that, because I've written thousands of thank you notes to different doctors for whatever reason. And I think that this is something is so easy, so not done in healthcare, but that if you bump into somebody in the hallway in the hospital and you're like, I should probably write him a thank you note for the patient he sent me last week, talk to us a little bit about how you use those as a tool.
Oh my gosh, listening to you speak, I'm thinking I should definitely use them more.
We all need more.
I think it's so important, especially now while people are just not happy right now for so many reasons. And I don't think we realize how far those thank you notes go. I keep all of my thank you notes from my patients because they are so meaningful for me. And people put so much thought into what they write. And, as far as my work goes, as the medical matchmaker, I always say, definitely send a thank you note after your interview, show that you're interested. And the older physicians always tend to be surprised that they don't get thank you notes, and the younger physicians don't really even think about it. So I think it's a little bit generational, but there's so much that can be said for thank you notes. It just goes so far, so far.
Well, final three questions, and these are pretty easy. We ask these of all of our guests. First of the three is, what are you known for?
Oh, I don't know. You tell me. I don't know. I'm known for my medical matchmaking.
All right. Well, the second question to that is a two-parter, because these both go hand in hand. What do you want to be known for?
I want to be known for making a difference. I want to be known for changing people's lives. And I want to be known for being the most awesome mom ever.
And for the doctors listening, the reason we ask those two questions, what are you currently known for? And what do you want to be known for, is instructive to every physician out there. Because when, according to a lot of different leadership experts outside of the bubble of healthcare, which I think is so ironic that businesses spend millions of dollars on staff training, employment training, on customer service and hospitality and all the like, yet healthcare lives in this bubble of customer no service. But when you ask these two questions, what are you known for and what do you want to be known for, and they get married together and they become the same answer, then you create this sales force for free in your life, in your practice, that people want to start talking about you. I know that I love bumping into a new doctor or an old doctor friend who I leave the conversation. I'm like, I'm so glad I met you because I can start bragging about you, because we don't have enough doctors in our lives as patients that we can really brag about. Our final question for you, and you're welcome to expand on that in this last question, but our final question we ask of everybody is, if you were to hand over the keys to the business, the keys to the kingdom, you're done. I'm like, that last client experience was exactly why I started, why I do what I do, but I'm going to go be a mom now, or I'm going to go, I won the lottery. I'm going to go live on a beach. What story of many, I'm sure, would come to mind that's like, this is why I do this?
One that's already happened, or then one that I would like to happen?
Probably. Well, I think, we've never had the one that probably should happen. So let's talk about that one if you want.
What I would like to happen is, because of my work, the hospitals have changed how they hire physicians and how they treat their physicians. If that happens, I can die a happy person. I'd really like enough physicians to feel empowered, like we spoke about earlier, to start their own practice, to join a private practice, to stand up to their hospitals, to the point that hospitals are not able to hire physicians unless they show them that they care about them, and they take out these onerous, non-competes and all these things in the contracts that we feel forced to sign. And I say feel forced, we are not forced to sign them. Once the hospitals have to treat their physicians better and listen to them and give us time to do what we need to do, that is when I will feel happy to hand over the keys.
Wow. Well, I hope that it's tomorrow, but you and I both know we may continue to, we both have a lot of work to do. So, but we all hope that it's tomorrow. So thank you so much. You're truly an example of a joyful, happy physician. And I think you're leading by example, not only in personal, in your personal life, but in your professional life, to show other physicians, regardless of their phase of their career, that it is possible to find joy in the practice of medicine. It is possible to not look at Monday morning like it's a penalty box. And it is possible, despite all of the bureaucracy and the things that you have to encounter and do and your responsibilities, it is still possible to love people. I think it was Bob Goff who said, more often than not, people want love and acceptance. And I would say that from me as a patient, I want love and acceptance from my physicians that I work with in my family's life and my daughter's life, more than sometimes I want their advice. Advice is helpful, but sometimes we just need your time. And I'll end with this. It is no longer about being the best doctor in the world anymore. It is about being the best doctor for the world, for your patients, and for your local community. Dr. Hochman, you are living up to that reputation, and I'm looking forward to the next time that we can connect in our schedules too.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.